welcome everyone to our first committee podcast for 2023. This is exciting. This is a series of conversations that we have with strata experts about how to build effective committees. And the focus of our conversations are around contemporary issues that we see from month to month come that will impact the strata sector. And we like to pick on, in particular, the human factors rather than say legal. But if there's something we need to obviously draw to anyone's attention, we can certainly do that. In the first 6 episodes, hi Geeta. In the first 6 episodes, we explored why people volunteer to be on a committee, which of course is really important for us who are all trying to recruit people onto committees. And through those 6 episodes, we discussed with Catherine and Nick and others about why they joined the committee in particular, and identified some important steps that we can be using to help recruit our committees, and that the 5 steps we came up with was building relationships with the manager and the committee, creating a work plan for the year and an action list to be achieved, creating a good handover from our outgoing committee to the incoming committee, keeping communication open and transparent, and of course a recruitment and induction pack for our new committee members, one for the strata manager and one from the chair. Then in our next 6 episodes, because we've been very busy, we explored with David Hamilton how to prepare your building for electric vehicles and the right way and the wrong way to go about this. This included things like conducting a survey, what due care and diligence means for a committee when they're going through that process, the right way and the wrong way to go about preparing your building for an EB. And just a hint here, the wrong way is allowing a extension lead to be dropped out of a window, running down to the basement, and this is a true story, parking to allow an electric vehicle to connect to. Definitely the wrong way. The importance of using expert advice. That was a great session. And then where David's really very first step was make sure you obtain a feasibility study. And of course, when we take now our sustainable conversation further than just EVing a building, we're actually now going to be considering electrifying the whole building, which in other words means removing a gas network, possibly installing solar. To do that bigger picture is going to definitely mean that feasibility study, because we need to understand the total load on the building before we commence anything. So number 1 recommendation, get the feasibility study for the big picture, then break it down into smaller bits. That was something you and I, Catherine, talked about how to, we identify all these projects, what do we do? And if you remember, our expert that we had then suggested, yes, break it down into the smaller ones and do the ones that, you can do either from your funding perspective and then put a plan in place to achieve the whole thing. So a mini strategic plan, if you like, around where we are now, where do we want to be, and then filling in how do we get there. And your expert will help you determine that. To review these recordings, and they're really worth seeing, Ros is going to pop into the chat box a link that will take you to the spot where you can now get access to our videos from our past sessions. That is really important. So joining us today, it would seem at the moment we have Catherine and myself. I know Nick's an apology because he's got an important meeting to go to, but he does promise us he will come back to us soon. And David Hamilton, who's been a regular for the last few, is possibly just running late, but hopefully he will join us shortly. So Catherine, welcome 2023. Great to have you back. For those who haven't met Catherine before, she has a wealth of experience after having been involved or lived in or invested in 15 other strata properties, which means not only has she got the property experience, but the 15 different management company experiences, plus 15 different committees. So a whole lot of human factors.
No, 3 different states as well.
And 3 different states, exactly. So talk about human factors. You've got a PhD in it about how to work with so many different agendas. So always a pleasure, Catherine, to help have these conversations, which is great. For this session, I thought we would share in particular a little bit more about the role that you're currently doing in WA, which is, of course, multi-tiered, as they often are. But you're, at the moment, you're still the current SCA president, as I am for Victoria. You are now for WA, and you have been for the last 12 months. But more importantly, WA has now started in a big way to produce more events and things for owners. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing there? How many typically come to those events, and what has the feedback been from those events?
Thanks, Julie. Yes, we tend to do 4 to 6 sessions a year with owners, and we have some shorter sessions which are generally a 2-hour block of information that will be around a theme. So, for instance, the next one we've got coming up in April in 2023 is one called Meetings, Motions and Minutes. So it's about how to run the meetings, it's how to take proper motions, how to craft proper motions, and how to take the minutes professionally. Last year, in the recent past, and we will repeat this year, we had one on how to be a treasurer, for instance, because, you know, I've said it before, I like being treasurer. It's my favorite job in buildings. You get to see all the bills, and you get to see who pays what, and all the contracts, and all. I think there's a lot of power in understanding where the money of your strata company goes. So we do one on that. We generally do one. We had one recently on insurance. That's a huge topic in WA and a lot of places now, with everybody's premiums going up dramatically last year, and they will be again this year. So those are the type of things. And we run an owners day, a full day dedicated to an owners conference day as well. And the last one we did was very successful. So in terms of numbers, we get, for those shorter sessions, we get about 50 people in the room. And then for the owners days, we've had between 150 and 200 people for the longer sessions. So yeah, we're pretty active in the owner space. We've got a newsletter that goes out as well, specifically targeted at owners and things that they might need to know. And yeah, so that's just to give you a rough idea. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Now, out of interest, when you're in those, so I know you do feedback, obviously, after, like we all do, you know, after an event, but sometimes during the event, you also pick up ideas, like when you're speaking there, I've written down 6 things. Is that, are they interactive sessions, meaning
yes.
that, you know, you can also learn from that about the other pain points that you may not have realised that owners are, I mean, given that a lot of this is being led, I'll say, by you as well, who is a lot owner advocating in this space. Obviously, you've got lots of ideas of things you know that lot owners don't know. But are you getting the right kind of feedback that helps develop the sort of sessions that would be next on the agenda?
Yes, we get 2 types of feedback. We get constructive feedback about our sessions, what people would like to see next, which is really helpful for us. EV charging, of course, and energy and all that is top of our list at the minute. So I suspect this year's owners conference will be very heavily targeted at that space. But we also get a lot of comments where people say, oh, I wish the other people in my strata company were here listening to this too, because often the people in the room, you know, we're already telling people with quite a wealth of knowledge who understand how the system works and understand whose role it is to do what. And they get a lot of grief from the others in their community who don't understand it as well. So yeah.
Yeah. What may be of great interest, because I did get an email from your secretariat asking what provisions did we have in Victoria around the safeguard of funds.
Yes.
So I imagine this is relating to a Landgate question from your perspective, or perhaps some property review, law review or something that's currently being undertaken. And so it's with sort of interest there, because when Victoria went through this property review session, we inherited, through no one's that we can work out's recommendation, now financial reporting to the Australian accounting standards. And this, just prior to this, I just came off a meeting with Treasury to try and work out, well, what does this mean? I mean, a strata is not BHP. What are you expecting? You know, for us, 50 to 50,000 strata schemes are self-managed. They're not going to be reporting to Australian accounting standards. I mean, what what was anybody thinking when they brought this in? And interestingly, I picked up a research report by the AASB when they, before they made this change of removing special purpose reporting and bringing everyone under general purpose reporting and tiering the levels that you have to report at. It did look at the strata legislation in every state. Unfortunately, they looked at the old version of Victoria's, but it seemed to be because New South Wales and some of the states were tied to trust accounting, they said there would be no change. It wouldn't impact them. They were exempt. They didn't have to do anything. But after hearing what our Treasury Department has said today, it's sounding more like that the framework is like, she was surprised that we thought that we didn't have a reporting framework already. So yeah, I think just keep your ear close to the ground there, because all of the treasuries all talk to each other.
Yes, it's a fascinating area, because strata schemes, they have an ABN and they have to do their BAS, and they have to do some bits of, like, if you were a normal company, let's call it a normal company, and yet there's a whole lot of things that they don't have to meet because they're not considered a normal company as well. And this money that's sitting out there on trust is an interesting one in WA, especially because we've just had, we're going through it now, but last year the government asked all strata managers how much money was on trust in their trust accounts, and the strata managers came up with a figure of 487 million. And the government was flabbergasted because they didn't realise it was so much. It was so much money sitting out there in trust accounts. And with, you know, in our state, there's no actual consumer protection to that money. It's just that the people we know our managers are managing it professionally and managing it to all the high standards. But you know, who knows what else happens in other non-SCA buildings. But yes, so it's a very interesting area. We are grappling with a lesser understanding in our government of strata here, but we're starting to win that battle. But it is a constant frustration, you know, because, you know, just looking at government grants as an example, you know, if you were a business, you could apply for all kinds of energy grants and all kinds of different kinds of grants, yet the strata companies and strata schemes don't meet the threshold of a commercial enterprise to apply for those grants. So there's a lot of ramifications. And you and I know, we've talked about this before, that all of the older stock in strata out there, roughly half of all apartments are older than 2020. And if our government at any level wants to hit net zero, they are going to have to deal with retrofitting those existing buildings with green measures. And they can't do that unless there's some sort of, you know, incentives or grants or some program to focus on these buildings. Yeah.
Yes. And of course, and I think this is pretty much, well, maybe except for New South Wales. New South Wales does seem to be more strata aware, at the government, I mean, than any other. We're like you. We don't even rate in a drop-down box. Not even, you know, the lot owner could apply for something, but common property can't. You know, so and I'll say the insulation was a classic. So the lot owner could get insulation in their ceiling, but nowhere else in the building did it have insulation. because it wasn't allowed. You couldn't apply for the grant in, for common property. So how does that thermal characteristic work? I don't know.
Exactly. And I agree with you. City of Sydney especially has excellent programs for strata buildings. They have one called Smart Green Apartments. And I would encourage all of our listeners and viewers to go and have a look at it and recommend it to your local government and recommend it to your state government and say, this is the kind of program that we need. I've just managed to get City of Perth here to release a grants program for strata buildings, residential strata buildings, that will pay for up to $10,000 of your consultants' reports for any sustainability measures, including neighbours' ratings. So that's the first little baby step we've had here. So I'm hoping I can get more understanding out there in local government and state government about what we're dealing with too.
Which is a good segue, because I can say likewise in Victoria, we've got two key things happening. We have City of Melbourne, which is equivalent to like the City of Sydney and your main council, leading the way in this area. And they have on the 7th of Feb, I will be attending a workshop about how to electrify your building. So they're rolling out a program, and they're providing every table with an electrical engineer so that we can, in small groups, discuss how that would be done in our buildings. They are starting the first workshop is on commercial buildings. The next focus will be on mixed use. And then last cab off the rank is residential. But of course, one of the things they didn't realise, that strata is commercial, strata is mixed use, and strata is residential. So hence why I'm on the very first one of the commercial one, so that we can understand the technical process from the engineer to then put it in a strata speak conversation about what we need to do. It'll inform us about that advocacy, that important advocacy of what do we need to help strata achieve this. And one of the things that, because I'm doing that same kind of conversation with City of Melbourne at the moment, and that was about the reports for neighbours, that the neighbours or the neighbours, either of them, were an important part of that journey, and also that to understand basically how to pull together a strategic plan for a committee to be able to follow, to be able to electrify their building, and that would be like a template. In other words, that would be a really useful tool for committees to go on this journey. Then we have on the 28th of March, we've got a coalition of City of Melbourne and two of our other inner cities, Marybeck and South Yarra. Again, very progressive councils in the sustainability area. And they're running a workshop called Unlocking Sustainable Strata. And that is, they have produced, through some grants that the councils themselves got, they've produced some infographics about electrifying your building, putting solar panels on apartments, townhouses and buildings. And this is the launch of those resources. So once they're launched, I'll be able to share those resources back to you, Catherine, in particular, over to WA, but of course right around, because that's part of what the goal of all of the councils are doing, is trying to get together to share these resources, but also not reinvent the wheel. So they're separating, well, you do solar, you do this, we'll do this, and then we put all that information together. So we're getting a hub together, which is fantastic.
That's fascinating.
Of that information. Yes. So it's a very active space. The sustainability bit is the drive. City of Melbourne has made their own goal that all buildings will be electrified in their LGA by 2040. We have, of course, the overarching 2050 government initiative for gas removal, as in no more gas for us, and that's a 2050 requirement. So it's real and it's there and it's going to drive. But I see the opportunity of that as well, and I feel the opportunity is going to be quite a few of them. Is is around that cohesiveness. So we talk a lot about here about committees and working together. Once there's a real sense of purpose of what the building needs to achieve and gets everyone, obviously it'll get everyone onto the one boat, onto the bus and getting in the same direction, then I think amazing things. I think it will be a really big turning point for cohesive strata as well, which will...
And Nick's not here, but I think he would be singing your praises for talking about strategic planning in strata.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, well, it is.
We don't do it. We just don't do it. Nobody sits down at the beginning of the year like we are now and say, right, what do we want to achieve this year? Or what do we want to achieve? What's our longer term goal? And what's the bit of that we need to achieve this year? Nobody, I've come across one building, and that's because I was driving it, but I have no experience of any other buildings sitting down and going, right, what do we want to achieve as a building? Every other business in Australia has that kind of goal. But for some reason, we're not running these buildings like they're businesses. Yeah.
No, exactly. And that is definitely one of the changes. And look at the segue. David's turned up. I knew he'd come.
I apologize.
Hi, David.
I had things that I just kept rushing over. So I've had a bad morning. I apologize for that.
You've got a business to run, and that's always important. But so I covered that you would be turning up at some stage during the podcast earlier in the session. But the question I'll just throw to you, David. So we've just heard from Catherine about what's happening in WA with respect to owners groups and the sessions and resources and the networking that's going on there. And last year through our sessions, we learned that you were one of the original founders of the South Bank 3006. And I thought this was just a perfect time at the start of the year to just reflect now on how that journey is going for you with that owners group, and then I'll then cover off what Nick would be contributing, but who can't be here today. So, David, do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of what's happening there?
Well, we've had a really successful year. I think, firstly, creating a residence group in an area like this, given the number of people who joined just as individuals, has been quite surprising, and the strength and the interest of people that it's changed the understanding that South Bank in Victoria is no longer a transitory location that people come, live, rent here, and then move on. And that increasingly the time that people are spending here, and the fact that more and more of them are owners who live here and have made this their place of residence, is changing what is required in the community. And the closing thing we did at the end of last year was to run the first ever, it was an event, but basically it was a Christmas party, right? A Christmas party for a neighbourhood. We had around about 1,500 to 2,000 people through that event.
Wow, that's huge, David.
Between 11 a.m. and 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We had the local member came, the mayor came, we had councillors come, but we had that number of people because we had basically it was focused around families, and people had never perceived that this was an area where there were families. Oh, and we also had it focused around dogs. But the council assisted us in all sorts of ways. They gave us a little grant. We got a sponsorship from a couple of organisations that have extensive business interests in here, particularly in strata buildings. So a company that DG Tech, which provides fibre optic backbones into the buildings and very high speed internet services, and one of the real estate agents. And they gave us a bit of money, but the council had staff available. They had people from the Parks and Rangers Department who brought wildlife down. We had the sustainability people. We just brought out a lot of the things that are here. And that was a sort of a thing which we'd always been on about, which was that this had to be made a community, that this was not just about advocacy about the area, but it was about how people lived here. And we'd had a number of very successful events during the years. So we've decided that we keep getting approached that the issue of strata owners corporations and strata committees and understanding issues, people are coming to us now wanting to build that linkage, and particularly, therefore, I think that with the SCA initiatives in this area, that will work in a very timely manner. So I think that's one of the things that we want to address this year, because we know there are buildings that are looking to come, and we don't want to run a network of owners corporations. We want to facilitate and work through this with SCA. So that's where Southbank 3006 is. It's now we've gone from nothing at this time of the last year, almost to the day, and we've now got close to 400 members. We've got the Facebook membership is, I think, pushing closer to 800. And every time we do something, we attract new people and different people. So it's been quite an interesting journey.
It is really exciting. And so in Victoria, we have a couple of postcode limited owners groups, which essentially I think are forming on that same basis, like a community. That's the community that's bringing it together. What, from SCA's perspective, what we are doing, and our inaugural meeting is on the 15th of March. We're all very excited. We're pulling together those particular owners groups, so some of the conveners or people who are, the organisers behind those owners groups, but also because we know not everybody lives in Docklands and Southbank. So we've got lots of invitations out there to chairs and lot owners who we know are proactive in this space as well, wanting to network, wanting to learn and share good experiences, and effectively, I'll say, with the motivation of promoting strata as a place to live, and rather than tearing it down sort of perspective, So yes, there are issues, but we want to identify those, and we want to, co-design our solutions and jointly make things better where we can. So we're looking for those sort of proactive people. And so, if you've got other names and things to share, please let us know.
Oh, yes. That definitely will happen. And I think one of the things that's coming through to us is that people who are on owners corporations want the learning experience, because where I came in and belatedly came in, people are wanting a construct about how to run an owners corporation. And not that it has to start afresh and people have to learn afresh every year. I think that's a real problem in strata management, this annual turnover of committees. And I've talked about that before. I just think it's you don't allow that in a company, right? A public company, a third of people could potentially change every year, but not the whole board. Generally, it's not the whole board. And so the loss of corporate memory, the loss of a skill is acutely felt when you suddenly, a whole committee changes, or everybody but one person changes, and then they all start again. I see that in my EV work, that a committee starts something and then everybody changes, and then they all start, and then it comes back, oh, well, what did we do, or what was happening? And then by the time they get up to speed, it's time for another election. And then there's some other, and you get all this factionalism that goes, rather than people seeing that the role of the committee is to manage the things on behalf of all owners, not of a particular interest group. So,
and also the strategic planning that we mentioned, of course, helps address some of that, David, right. Because if there's a plan that everyone's agreed to, then whoever the management committee is, that's what they're charged with, the continuation and the delivering of that plan, which knocks out the self-interest kind of idea as well. But believe it or not, well, yeah, maybe not. Believe it or not, we've filled our conversation time of 30 minutes. Every time we do this, I feel we need more, because we could explore so many more conversations. One of the things I did want to say was about some topical things that were happening. David was very generous with his time and helped SCA submit a great submission to the ACCC consultation on the lithium-ion batteries, which is in particular, our standpoint there was to differentiate in particular the regulation around EV batteries in cars and their relationship compared to, in particular, the micro batteries that we find in our e-bikes, e-scooters, and other small transport type skateboards, because they are the ones that are causing the fires, not the EVs and cars. So we definitely were coming from a position of, say, regulate around the problem areas, not a one size fits all. So thank you, David, for your contribution for that. And then lastly, other than to promote our next month's vodcast, which will of course be the first Friday of the month again, is that you can find the videos here through the link of www.stratacommunity.education/SCA/webinars. So that will give you the place to go to find, and I recommend that you go there to get our past sessions. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again next month.